follicles. We can get them from adipose tissue. And much of my research is in fat metabolism. And I have published one paper in stem cells, and that's with a colleague, Dr. Jeff Gimbel, at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center, you people from Louisiana here, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So that's really an obesity research center, and I've worked a little bit with Jeff Gimbel at that institution where we've provided human fat, where he's harvested adult stem cells out of the adipose organ. What a great place to get adult stem cells, right? Anybody want to give up a little fat here tonight? We can go ahead and propagate those stem cells. To take care of America's obesity problem, this might be a good way to go about doing it, right? All right, so let's compare these cells. The embryonic stem cell on the left and the adult stem cell on the right. The embryonic stem cell, let me use the term again, pluripotent. This cell can go in any direction that you make it go. And by the way, this just doesn't happen naturally. The scientist in his or her laboratory is coaching these cells to go in a particular direction based on the types of proteins and kind of factors that modify DNA replication and transcription and all the processes that make a cell divide. So they can become any cell, but they have to be coached in a particular direction. The adult stem cell is called multipotent, and it can become some of the cells from the organ it's been obtained from, but not all. And again, this is the concept of a skin cell is not going to become cardiac muscle. It's just going to be a cell that can generate some of the cells that we have in our skin. The embryonic stem cell is stable and it can undergo multiple cell divisions. Remember, self-renewal, infinite replication. Whereas the adult stem cell is less stable and its capacity for self-renewal is somewhat limited. Now you're going to see that this is a changing paradigm. The third point is that the embryonic stem cell is easy to obtain, but you destroy the blastocysts. And we're going to look a little data for a second about what happens to these fertilized eggs that are in the freezer when they're not used. And we can think forward too about the ones we don't know about. The adult stem cell is difficult to isolate in adult tissue. Yes, that's the technical challenge, but now the methodology is advanced substantially. This is a slide I think I used 5 years ago when I talked to you. So I'm going to show you that there has been advances here. The fourth point is that the embryonic stem cell has a possibility of being rejected. This is like any other transplantation. If I would take embryonic stem cells from somebody's daughter who just was undergoing in vitro fertilization, we took stem cells from there and we transplanted it into Ed over here. Ed's body's not going to like that. That's a different human subject with different antigens on the surface of those cells. It's like any other rejection. People that get kidney transplants or liver transplants or heart transplants have to be on anti-rejection medication for the rest of their life. There'd be no difference here. What would make an embryonic stem cell from a fertilized ovum, when we take those cells, grow them up, and now make them into heart muscle, what would make them any different than any kind of other kind of transplant? So this is a concern. And that problem has not been completely answered. In the adult stem cell, the host rejection is minimized. So if I would take cells from my wife, Margaret, and we would grow those into, say, a heart valve, if she had valvular heart disease, we're putting her own cells back in her. That's tolerated, right? We're giving her own cells back. There's no immunologic reaction to those. That's not like a transplant. And most of you know that allogeneic transplants were like for leukemias and lymphomas where people's bone marrow are harvested and stem cells are taken out and grown into normal cells. That's allogeneic. People are transplanting their own cells back into themselves. That's tolerated because we're giving ourselves back what we took out. All right, important principle, I think. Now, why all the controversy over stem cells? I think these are questions up front that we need to take into consideration. Is an embryo a person?
On its way.
On its way. You're not willing to
Yes, they're a person that has their own DNA. They are unique. There will never be another one like them.
All right. Is there any disagreement? All right. We have a consensus view. This would be a rare crowd to have a consensus view on something like that, but I know why you're meeting here, so I expect that. Secondly, is it morally acceptable to use embryos for research? I'm not sure we have a consensus there, but anyway, we're possibly gaining consensus on that issue. And how far will the research go? Will man circumvent God? What about cloning? I mean, the ultimate, making the embryo what we want it to be by modifying gene expression. Will evolution, important to this group, will evolution then be under man's control and vastly accelerated in terms of the world's view of what evolution's about? And the evolutionary concept, isn't it that we're going to be better over time? What does God say about time and man's evolution, quote unquote, even if we are created? Things are going downhill, aren't they? We're born to die because of Adam's sin, right? I mean, death is before all of us, except for who? Enoch? Who else? Elijah. Right. Those two made it out of here without dying first. Lazarus got regenerated as many other people did. Yeah. So, but all of us have death before us. But for the believer, as Paul said, for me to live is Christ and die is gain. And the way I take that statement is either way you win. So the idea of death before us all is biblical. And of course, the prophecy before us is that the earth is not going to improve. I mean, the book of Revelation, which I'm listening to now in the morning on the way to work, it's J. Vernon McGee's dialogue, really is going into great detail about what this earth is going to be like during the periods of the end times. Anyway, all this aside, man would potentially, through his sin nature, get the embryos and start modifying things to try to improve human existence. That's scary, I think.
Cloning legalized, wasn't it in France or somewhere?
Well, except, the reports out of South Korea a number of years ago where the human had been cloned has in fact not been proven true.
No, I'm saying they legalized it.
Well, that may be true, but